Good morning, guys. It's Wednesday morning. It's 6 a.m. after a snowy night here in Kiev, the capital of Ukraine. And I'm up so early this morning, and the reason I look so tired is that today is a very special day. I'm going to be going to somewhere I've wanted to go to for a very, very long time, Chernobyl. I'm going to be getting on a bus from the square here in the center of Kiev, Maidan. And afterwards, we'll be taking a 2-hour bus journey to Chernobyl. I'll be there for a few hours, 8 hours or so. And afterwards, a 2-hour journey back to Kiev until the end of the day. I'm going to take loads of videos. I'm going to tell you as much as I can, as much as I learn, show you what I can of the place. So yeah, let's go. The journey to the first exclusion zone checkpoint took just under 2 hours. We drove through the outskirts of Kiev, over a river, through villages and forests, and more villages and more forests. Once leaving Kiev, the population density rapidly decreased, and as we reached within a few kilometers of the exclusion zone, villages were sparse, and there were almost no people on the streets. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, came the first police checkpoint. This is our first stop on the trip, the 30-kilometer exclusion zone checkpoint. We have to go through here, show passports to police, show our tickets, and then we're in to the exclusion zone. I got through with no problems.
After the accident, they understand that they have to evacuate the population of this area.
Once into the exclusion zone, our tour guide Tanya showered us in facts and stories about Chernobyl.
Yeah, because it's quite close to the nuclear facility, it's only 3 kilometers.
The first stop on our tour was the Chernobyl Sign, a common spot for tourist photos. Here on the sign you can see the Ukrainian spelling Chernobyl. The city name comes from the name of the plant, Wormwood. After taking photos, we got back on the minibus and entered the city of Chernobyl. The first stop in Chernobyl was the memorial Wormwood Angel. Wormwood is an angel in the Bible who made the waters bitter. After the nuclear disaster in Chernobyl, people's minds immediately turned to the biblical story of Wormwood. Many religious people said that the biblical prophecy had come true. Because of this connection, an angel memorial was constructed in the city of Chernobyl. Next to the angel, you can find a huge line of crosses with names on it. Many non-Russian or non-Ukrainian speakers may think that these names indicate people who died in the disaster. But in fact, these are villages in the surrounding area which were evacuated and subsequently died. Some of these villages today have a small population of people called self-settlers, but the population of these villages are in the double or single figures, and it is illegal to move in from the outside. The average age of the permanent population was 63 in 2007. Before entering the highly contaminated 10-kilometer radius, we went to one of the only 2 restaurants in the town of Chernobyl, which nowadays caters mainly for tourists. While within the exclusion zone, it is forbidden to eat outside, so everybody stops here for lunch. So I'm back on the bus now after eating lunch. We've eaten in a restaurant which is within the 30-kilometer radius exclusion zone. It's the last restaurant you can eat in before it's too contaminated to eat. So we got back on the bus. We're going to head now towards the 10-kilometer exclusion zone, go through passport control once again. Once we're through that, we're going to go and see the reactor that blew up and go and see Pripyat, the village which is left abandoned. So that's coming next. We passed through Chernobyl town on the way to the final checkpoint. While driving through the town, you can see many abandoned houses and apartment blocks. A small number of people still reside in houses marked with the signs, "Owner of this house lives here." Workers on watch and administrative personnel of the exclusion zone are stationed here in the city on a long-term basis. There are also 2 general stores. The city was evacuated on the 27th of April 1986, 30 hours after the Chernobyl disaster. Even though the human population has dwindled, because the city has become overgrown, it is estimated that more mammals live there now than before the disaster. Overall, in the exclusion zone, the population was estimated at 197 in 2012, down from 328 in 2007. I successfully passed through the 10-kilometer exclusion zone checkpoint, and we drove through a few kilometers of empty snow forests before reaching the first point of interest, This first stop was to be the old village of Kapachi, abandoned since 1986. After Kapachi was evacuated by the authorities, all the houses were torn down and buried as an experiment. This plan was subsequently abandoned, and this village was the only one suffering this fate. The name Kapachi, coincidentally and eerily, translates as gravediggers, perhaps another incidence of nominative determinism.
My crystals were 8.84, 9.19.
The village is highly contaminated and showed a radiation reading of 8, more than 50 times of the background radiation in your own home. A kindergarten and one other brick building are the only architectural structures that remain standing in this village. All other buildings were bulldozed. I took a look inside the kindergarten.
It's safe, I mean, with the levels of radiation.
The kindergarten is an incredibly eerie place to visit, and it's amazing what still remains inside. The front porch still has a bunch of abandoned toys, and one of the windows is inhabited by a plastic toy rabbit. The entrance to the school has a notice board in Russian and a Russian grammar poster, which would be pretty useful even for me today. The old shelves have books and papers lying on them. Some of the abandoned rooms are just falling apart and broken, and seemingly looted. Other rooms are completely full of school papers, toys, and sheet music. Two rooms have rows of beds, including this one with bunk beds. Toys, cups and papers are left all over the beds. I recorded a little video inside the room, detailing my own feelings at the time. It's really creepy in here.
Primary and official language is Ukrainian.
Yes. It was time to leave the kindergarten and to get back on the bus.
For example, if you're...
After the village of Kapachi, we headed to the reactor itself. The immediate part of the drive was a snowy wilderness with not a building in sight. After some time, we could see some of the other reactors which didn't explode. This here is a water cooling tower. These are reactors 5 and 6, which were never completed and are now completely rusty. The cranes are still in the exact location they were in on the day they were abandoned. The construction of reactors number 4 and 5 continued throughout the night of the explosion at the 4th reactor, despite what was happening. The next day, at 8 AM that morning, the 286 construction workers of the day clocked on. The construction was however soon postponed, and 3 years later the decision was made not to complete construction. Reactor number 5 was approximately 70% complete at the time of the accident. As you turn left, only a few hundred meters from the uncompleted Reactor 5, you can see the now covered Reactor 4, the place of the disaster. Here we are guys, the site of Reactor number 4, the reactor that blew up and caused the mess all that time ago in the 1970s here in Chernobyl. This is the reason it all started, but it's covered now for safety. That's where it was. It's the main thing. Our tour guide showed us exactly how the exploded reactor looked before the protective cover was built for it. The confinement shelter was finished in 2013, and it's an absolutely incredible piece of engineering built by a multinational team. In front of the reactor, there is a monument to the constructors of what is called the Sarcophagus. The Sarcophagus was the original shelter, built in 1986, and was a massive steel and concrete structure covering the nuclear reactor number 4. It was designed to limit radioactive contamination of the environment. The new, modern, safe confinement shelter was deemed necessary in 1996, but took almost 20 years to build, mainly due to a funding gap. The cost of the structure was about 1.5 billion euros. After the reactor, we got on the bus to head to the abandoned village of Pripyat. This marks the end of part 1 of this video series. In part 2, I'll show you an abandoned restaurant, supermarket and theatre, as well as the world famous abandoned theme park. Thank you for watching, and please subscribe if you'd like to see more.
Bak